Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Ola Söderström. I am a professor at the Institute of Geography of this beautiful and well-known university, and I have the honor to welcoming you to this public conference, which is called Should We Legalize Drugs? Current Challenges of Policies Surrounding Drugs in Switzerland and around the world. And perhaps you already know, or I will tell you now, that this is really in two parts. This evening we have the first part with three specialists that will speak to us about drugs, drug policies in Switzerland as well as internationally. We will listen to Mrs. Ruth Dreyfus first, who, of course, as you know, is the former president of the Swiss Confederation. And she is also a member of the Global Commission on Drug Policy, which is why she's here tonight. And this is a very important commission at the international level. She is a very active member of this Global Commission. Our second speaker is Mr. Olivier Géniat, who is the head of the legal police here in Neuchâtel, the criminal police rather. And the third speaker is Jean-Félix Savery. He is the general secretary of the group in Romandie on the study on addiction. So these are our three keynote speakers this evening. Each speaker will speak for about 15 minutes, after which the idea is to open up the floor. So we are going to present you a little bit the overview of legal policy surrounding drugs around the world. So note down your questions. You won't be able to ask them right away because we will listen to them at the end after the three presentations. We will have 45 minutes, which we have set aside, and perhaps even a few more minutes for an open and honest debate. Tomorrow, there's going to be the second part of this conference, which is a scientific seminar, which will gather together 15 specialists on these issues which we will debate this evening. Most of these speakers are already present here today. This is why there is simultaneous interpretation provided during this conference. If they wish to do so, they will be able to ask their questions in English, and it will be translated on the floor into French. And they will hear the English translation into their magic headsets. Now, if the issue of legalizing or regulation of drugs, according to the different positions that have been taken, and we will hear in all the different statements that we have to ensure a distinction between regulation and legalization. Now, if this issue is being brought up today, it is because of a failure of international policies regarding bans on drugs. These failures from the past few decades. There are many different experts, international reports that have been written that come to the same observation, that there has been a failure of policies based on the prohibition of drugs. There has been a failure because, of course, one of the aims was to ensure the disappearance of the market of drugs at the international level, which has not happened. There have been a whole series of negative effects, negative outcomes, of course, because of these policies, and we will touch upon these this evening. So we really have to delve into why there has been such a failure, what alternatives exist, how can we better regulate this phenomenon, because of course we must regulate it. And more broadly, we can look at narcotics policies, and this could be valid for other sensitive issues, sensitive social issues, such as the environment, which is being debated at the COP21 in Paris these days. So we're looking at alternatives. Is there a possibility of really a drastic change in policy within many different policies around the world? How can we really change direction? We are looking at how to do this for drugs and for other areas. And is it possible? So this is really the subject of the conference and the subject of tonight's debate. The debate will be moderated by Julie de Dardel, who is here at the center. She is on center stage. Julie de Dardel, she is really the engine, the artisan behind this whole conference. She is doing a postdoctorate at the Geography Institute, my institute, where she is researching the shifting in drug policies at the international level. I have the great privilege and honor to invite Ruth Dreyfus to the podium for the first of the 3 statements, which will allow us to have a debate on these important issues. Thank you very much to all 3 participants for being here tonight and having accepted our invitation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for these words of welcome. Welcome to all those who come from countries from all over the world to participate in tomorrow's seminar and the seminar which will be held on Saturday. It seems to be an incredible opportunity. This is also an opportunity to meet experts working on drug policies from all over the world. I have been asked to speak about the international framework on drug policies. I must confess that this is a little bit difficult because there are people in the room today that know a lot more about the subject than I do, and there are others that know a lot less. So perhaps allow me to speak to those who know less about these drug policies, to be able to inform them regarding this policy, and I will look at really the Swiss aspect of the discussion. So I will focus on the Swiss aspect. So the international framework on drug policies, well, it's a really long history. It is more than a century old, and this is really a tumultuous history. There are many economic interests of great powers, and I would like to remind you, of course, of everything that happened over a century ago between India, China, India under the British rule. There was, of course, the Opium Wars, the will to create a situation of domination in that particular region in the world. And as you know, Great Britain, to be able to export the production of opium from India, forced China to open up its markets and open up its borders and accept opium to flood the country. From the beginning until up to today, I would say we can see that there are economic interests that are vested in this issue. There are different aspects that date back to a long time, and I would call them hygienic aspects. People want to force people to be healthy, to be hygienic, to have behaviors that we consider to be healthy behaviors, or behaviors actually that are moral behaviors, that have a high moral ground. So there is a lot that is allowed or not allowed in terms of rules in society and behaviors and reactions in society. So this is an attempt that, of course, to say, let us ban what is unhealthy. This would be the simplest thing to do, of course, if we just look at these types of behavior. If we just ban these types of behavior, then we will have a better, healthier world. But there are other aspects that we must take into consideration. For example, repression of dangerous zones, which was called dangerous zones. From the very beginning, people that were disadvantaged, that were drug consumers, were considered to be particularly dangerous because they did take drugs. So I think that this is very similar with what is happening here with the ban on absinthe, which lasted for about a century, I believe. People said that absinthe that was drunk by certain people in this country made them crazy. And so it was classified as very dangerous. But dangerous also can encompass minorities, such as ethnic minorities, that could seem to be threatening. If the substances that are considered to be the most dangerous are the substances that are consumed by foreigners, it is not wine, it is not tobacco, it is opium. And of course, this is not just by chance that this idea came about, because it was foreigners that consumed opium, and so therefore it was seen to be something to be very dangerous that should be banned. Latinos that used to smoke marijuana, for example, There were very dangerous hippies as well that were fighting against the war in Vietnam, and they were considered to be dangerous people. There are also military interests at play. The problem of drugs was imported to countries such as France or England through their colonial experience and their colonial background. And by re importing civil servants from these colonial states that had taken up the habit of consuming certain types of drugs and that had become dependent on those drugs. So there was the colonialism, the war in Vietnam, if we are speaking here about weed or heroin. All of this has played a role in ensuring the stigmatization of specific substances. So we have a long history, a history of over